What up? Welcome to Homegrown Hustle, where local brilliance takes the center stage. I'm your host, Matt Eickman. Together, we're about to embark on an inspiring journey. Our community thrives on the wisdom of insightful leaders that are right here in our backyard. And we're bringing their expertise to your ears. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your guide. Join us every week in celebrating innovation, guidance, and the power to inspire greatness. Let's explore the stories that shape our local business landscape, and together, let's ignite the spark of excellence. Welcome to the Homegrown Hustle. I'm here with Paul Childers, CEO of Blue Sky Biz Solutions and the host of Roll Up and Roll Out podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Appreciate you coming out here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate you and inviting me in and being able to join you on your podcast. It's always a fun experience anytime I do these things.
And we're in studio here in Forest Lake too, so I know yours is over distance because you're national with your brand. But for those that don't know you that are listening to this, you just want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of what you do.
Yep. So my name is Paul Childers. I am married. I got a wife. We're going on 15 years this summer. She's been with me through thick and thin, which is super important if you're an entrepreneur. We got 2 kids. And I got stories I can tell about a year of business with kids on hand because they're very honest people. And they tell you how you see it.
No filter.
But no, not at all. So first and foremost, that's who I am. I'm a dad and I'm a husband.
Love that.
And that's really what I built my business around, was being able to be more of that and the freedom to be more of that. Secondly, I'm a guy out there that has some knowledge that I just want to help educate business owners on, that I think it falls through the cracks for a lot of business owners. We have KPIs for sales, we have KPIs for operations, we have indicators for culture and hiring, but we don't ever seem to really be able to piece things together for lending and protecting our personal credit as we scale and build our business. And it's a gap that's out there, and it's a kind of, I think, an important gap and a conversation that needs to be had more and be brought to the light. So that's been my biggest focus this last year and a couple months here, is just highlighting some of that stuff. So,
and with access to capital being one of those things that limits business growth, this is such an incredibly important thing for those businesses that are trying to scale, so that they're, one, protecting their personal credit and their personal assets, and then also they can get access to more capital potentially, right?
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about your podcast, because I would assume there's a thread kind of similar to this going through it, right?
Yeah. So I work with, the majority of my business owners that I work with are home service, blue collar guys that, either quit their job because their boss didn't do things the way that they thought they should do, and they started out on their own. People much like myself who struggled through school with the structure of school education, that got out and found that they were really good with their hands, or really good with applied logic and knowledge, and built a business off of that really tied their world to that business, right? And are really trying to figure out how to make it into a business instead of just a job. So the podcast is called Roll Up, Roll Out. The theme of it is, you don't need your GED if you know how to GSD and get shit done. Because at the end of the day, that's a common theme of like these business owners, right? Is like, we maybe don't know everything, but we're going to figure it out.
But we make it happen.
Yeah,
like,
we're resourceful. Yeah, and that's the thing I really enjoy about working with a lot of my clients, is they're just super resourceful people that, in a lot of cases, they just don't know what they don't know, and nobody's ever sat them down and had that conversation with them. Like, hey, this is why this is important. And I did it from a selfish standpoint because I just love hearing the stories of like, how did you build your business? Like, what made you think of think of this business? How long did it take you? I've had guys that started when they were 18. They were like, I don't know why I'm going to college. I might as well just do this, right? Like at 18, I was worried about, like, I want to go to college and party and drink and be an idiot. Like, I wasn't even thinking about business.
In MLB, that's what I was going to do at 18, but that didn't work out for me, Paul. So here we are. Lucky you, I guess. So, like, you've got 20 some episodes out for that right now. So what's like one or two things that are like a common thread that come up as you were having those conversations and really learning about those individuals behind those businesses?
Action taking and not having a fear of failure. Really the really overarching theme of it was they acted. They didn't think. They didn't sit there and go, oh, this is something I want to do. I think I'm going to do that. They just did it. Like a lot of them just did it really without knowing at the time why. They're just like, I just need to do something. They're
just shooting without really knowing like what's behind the target.
They just started, right? And all of a sudden it like spun into like $1 million business. And they're like, what do I do now?
I got to figure this out, I guess, right? Yeah. So I very much found myself in a similar situation.
So like action taking, and that's a real common one. Not having any fear of failure, right? Like a lot of these guys, some of them I talked to, they've been on, this is business number 7 for some of them. So they've failed, started and failed several other businesses, and they keep going because that's just what they know. They know that they can make it back and then some.
So perseverance.
Yeah, perseverance, stupidity, a little bit, stubbornness.
But those individuals that have failed, gone on 7 businesses, I take it they're learning each time and something's evolving and changing. So when you're working with your customers now with Blue Sky, are you typically working with those companies that are scaling? Are you having any conversations around exiting and structuring for that part of the whole business journey?
Yeah, that comes up. A lot of the guys that I work with they're at that. They just either hit or are just below like that 7-figure number or just a little bit over. Obviously, I have some that are over that, like the 15 million and up to like $25 million businesses. But the majority of the ones I'm working with are at that, like, I just bootstrapped everything with my personal credit cards. Where do I go now? So that 7-figure, early 7-figure, trying to untie, trying to start taking hats off and become a business owner.
Delegating, outsourcing, those type of things, so that they're not doing all of these things and then having to learn all those things too. Learning takes time, especially when it's something that's not natural for you, right?
It does. And we tend to actually, what's funny is we tend to delegate strengths before weaknesses because we aren't comfortable with what we don't know or what we aren't strong at. So it's sometimes hard for us to hire somebody to do something that we're not good at, because how do we oversee that? So what happens is an owner that's really good at sales tends to hire a salesperson because they're like, I'm a good salesperson, I can oversee this. And then they try to do the things that they're not great at. Well, what happens is that salesperson usually doesn't have the same integrity that you do about your company. You're not spending enough time actually training and working with them because you're working on stuff that you hate and don't like doing. And so it just spins into a big ball of like a mess, when in reality, you should actually your first hire should be somebody that does the things that you don't enjoy and aren't good at doing.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're working at finance as like part of the reason why people come to you. But if we're talking scaling, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that conversation you just described kind of sounds more like coaching and leadership training to me. So tell me a little bit about your background there.
Yeah. So, I mean, my background is from automotive mainly, but I came up in sales. I had a chance to, I've worked a lot of different jobs, from hourly jobs to being a manager at Target, to then getting into automotive sales. And really I learned a lot there from having a really good GM and owner. Justin Olson was his name. And he taught me just a ton. Like, he taught me how to help with people, work with people, make them better, understanding that your people really are the reason you're there. It's not always just your customers. It's actually your employees as well that make the customer experience that much better. So when people,
that really is the company.
Yeah. So when people tell you, like, treat your customers right, like, sometimes that goes over their head, when really, like, you're, as a business owner, one of your main customers is your employees.
That's part of our ethos, man. Like, your employees, especially in a service business, any type of transaction, face to face, like, that person, that face, that voice represents your company. And sometimes there's a little oversight when you're scaling a business because it happens so quickly, in ensuring like what's being said and the type of communication there. Do you work on those type of things with the companies that
I tend to? I don't charge for it, just because, like, I don't know, like, it's just one of those things that's just in the back of my brain. I'm there to help you with your finances and stuff, but like, we get into a lot of different conversations, about that type of thing that I just happen to learn along the way as I've been a part of other businesses. So like, when I was with NTS Tire Supply, phenomenal ownership at that company, really employed some really unique culture tactics, from actual, like, true profit sharing.
That's awesome.
Like, if there was a way that I could I've been trying to figure out how to articulate this a little bit more, but I might just have to go call Ben and try to sit down with him again. But the way that they sched and set up their profit sharing is unlike anything that I've ever experienced, to a point where, time with the company mattered. But, if we had a really good year, the secretary who had been there for 6, 7, 8 years was taking home close to 100K as well as everybody else. Right. So like, you want to talk about really getting buy-in from employees. It got to the point where we didn't even have to really hire people. The employees would recruit people that they thought would be a good fit. Yeah.
That's powerful.
They knew it was huge. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot there being on the C-suite team. They were definitely a company that grabbed onto things like traction, EOS, business coaching, and took it to an extreme level.
So you were part of that in a growing business and got to learn it and then also implement that
and the year
at a high level.
The year and 2 months that I was there, we grew from about an 18 million a year company up to about 32 million.
It's pretty decent.
We
growth.
Increased gross profits from about 28% up to 36%. Our net profits went up, 6.5% because of a lot of the things that we implemented and the way that we did things. We understood that price increases were necessary and natural, like a 1 to 2% price increase every year will literally pay for employee expansion in and of itself. So how do we avoid discounts? How do we sell on value? That kind of stuff was what I learned and took away from that. So that's just stuff that I just have in my head that I share with my clients. People don't think about it,
right? Like, especially if you're talking like a sub $1 million company or even like right at $1 million, a lot of times that happens so incredibly fast, and the purchasing of the tools, equipment, vehicles, all that goes into it. You just got to, like you said, make it happen.
Yep.
Right. So for somebody that might be going through that, what are some things that you would recommend that they think about and maybe look at their own financials to better position as they go to look for lending through their expansion?
Yeah. The first thing I always tell people is there is no more important item for you to understand in your business than your P&L and your books. And I'm in a couple different coaching groups that I'm connected with a guy out in Oregon. His name's Jesse Bounds. He has 10-4 coaching. He's a farmer, hay farmer. And
that's badass.
Well, and he's doing a $30 million a year business essentially. And
with hay?
With hay. Yeah.
I love it.
Hay press and stuff. He's an incredible guy to be connected with. But, we talked about farmers. I'm married into a farm family, so I'm going to say this with a lot of love, but like they do farmer math a lot and they don't run their farms like businesses. And
because it's homestead, it's like the house, right?
Yeah, basically.
They run it like a personal.
Or they have money in the account, we're good to go, But you need to know, and this is for any, like honestly, like that's a lot of business owners' like mentality is there's money in the bank, I'm good to go. Well, what are your costs of goods? Like where are the expenses coming from? What's your AR? What's your account receivable cycle looking like? Are you working with residential or are you doing commercial? If you're commercial, how are you planning for 30 to 45 day net pays from these guys? What happens if they don't pay you in 30 to 45 days?
This is all incredibly important because this is how money moves through the business, right?
But so we just look at it as like, oh, it's in my account, I'm good. Well, you wake up the next day and like 40K hits your account for expenses, and you're like, oh crap, I'm not good. Like, what do I do?
It's a bummer.
It's like cash flow. I mean, you could have a whole conversation on what cash flow actually is, to a business, but you don't know that until you know your numbers. So what I tell everybody is when you start getting to a point where you're consistently making 10 to 20K a month in like revenue, because revenue is, in my opinion, is garbage. We should care about profit, but you don't know profit until you know your books. You should hire a bookkeeper because you as a business owner are not a bookkeeper. I don't care if you went to school for an accountant. As an accountant, you're not a bookkeeper. You're not going to manage your own books after working 12 hours a day and you come home at night and you're like, all right, I'm going to sit down and do my books. It's not going to happen.
You're going to drink a couple
beers. Don't fool yourself. Don't pretend. Like it's not going to happen. Hire a bookkeeper. You can find really good bookkeepers for $300 a month. It'll probably be one of the best investments that you've ever made as a business owner at that time.
And you prevent the stress in that time that should be spent with your family. Because a lot of blue collar guys, like they're doing what they're doing because of their family, and they just happen to be really good at it. And they're serving a need within their community. Right?
And until you learn how to not be self-employed, you're not.
Tell me what you mean by that.
So when you start a business and you're like, I want my freedom, right? What we find, especially with a lot of these baby boomers right now that are retiring, is they just created their own job, right? They created a lifelong job where they're employed by themselves, right? So if they leave on vacation, right, you started this business to be free to go do the things you want to do. But now you can't leave on vacation because you didn't build a business.
You're a slave to this.
Nobody's there to make money for you when you're gone. So you're not going to go on vacation because you're not making any money, right? That's what I mean by self-employed. up until you get to the point where you can start delegating and hiring so you're not self-employed. A really good litmus test for that for a business, if you think that you're getting to a point where like, I'm a real business. Yeah, I'm a real business. I'm a real CEO. Leave on a trip for 2 weeks with minimal contact. And if you come back and it's better than how you left it, you've got yourself a business. And now you have some freedom. But if your phone's blowing up with employees panicking and asking you all these questions and not being able to make, customers calling, employees not being able to make decisions, like they're texting you or calling you for really simple things like, hey, can I give this discount to this customer? You're still self-employed.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. Like, depending what size you're at, like I know quite a few pest control companies below that $1 million mark, and they're just getting after it. They have to be out in the field, like especially in season when they're getting it right. But at a point, if you're a business owner and you want to call yourself a CEO, you got to zoom out and continue to learn and evolve past that. That day-to-day, those activities that you had, and you got to look at the business as a shareholder of that business, right? Because you as the operator, that's your job, but you're also an investor and owner of that. So there has to be two different lines of thought with that. And then at some point, you as the investor have to look at yourself as the operator and say, hey, is this guy doing a good job?
Yeah, it's balanced.
Like, is he effectively managing the finances here and driving the company in a direction that
you have to have your hands on,
right?
Yeah, you have to have your hands in it, right? It's kind of the old saying: it's trusting but verifying, and that's the different levels you get to is going to affect how that looks for you, right? Like as you actually scale, you're going to start building a team under you. When you hire a manager, your sole job as the owner is to train that manager to do the things that you're doing with those employees underneath them. So your only touch point, I would say, always be present as a CEO or an owner, but don't be the boss with all the employees, especially if you hire a manager. So
sometimes you got to play dumb and be like, I don't know what you're doing. Like,
the worst thing you can do as an owner that's trying to undelegate, if that makes sense, or actually start delegating, maybe that's a better word, is undermining the person you hired to help you with that, because then employees are just going to bypass them and keep coming to you. So sometimes,
and then that guy's pissed.
Yeah. Well, you just made his job miserable, right? Because you just took away any authority that he should have.
And confidence, especially like the confidence building of those people that are part of your team as you're growing. If you want to scale, decision-making has to have increasing speed, right? So it has to happen faster, because now as you're bigger, there's more decisions that have to be made, and it cannot all bottleneck right at the business owners. No. So building that confidence and training them, adding to their knowledge base through ongoing like business education allows for them to think about the business and make decisions with the business's like best intentions, right? Yep. And that's one thing I see a lot, where the financial attachment that the business owner has to the finances kind of cripples the decision making that employees have. Correct. Because they understand that, like, hey, this guy owns the business. Yeah, he might be a cool guy and we play softball together or whatever, but they like that the financial component, like sometimes the perception employees have is it's just one and the same, right? And there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes that employees might not know. Yep. So do you ever have conversations around that and transparency in finances and P&L with a growing team? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about.
So I think a good book that everybody should read is called The Great Game of Business.
Oh yeah.
And that book is one of the things that we took at NTS and kind of really started digging into and learning of how do you have financial transparency with your company so that your employees understand, here's my job, here's how I get paid, here's how it affects not only me, but other departments, here's how I can affect increases in profit by being efficient at what I do and caring about what I do. And oh, by the way, like, the owners probably 100% aren't taking home nearly as much as what you assume they are, right? You see $15 million a year company, and
some of these guys
are
like, broke.
You're like, man, this owner is living large. And then you look at the net profit statement, it's like 80K, and you're like, dude, this guy's broke as a joke. Can't do anything. Like, he couldn't finance a bottle of Sprite if he wanted to, right? So like, it's helping people understand that and see that. But again, unless you understand your books,
I mean, so many of us as like young, growing business owners and entrepreneurs, we're looking at that top line revenue, right? And we just want to blow that up. and we pour into marketing and all these different costs that take away from like the whole reason you're doing, like, you're running a business. Like, if a business doesn't make profit, why? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Especially in blue collar,
Yeah.
right? Now you're a slave to this thing that you built. You're not making money. You're putting more of your own money back into
Yep.
it, and then people begin to like hate it, right? And then it takes away all the motivation for that. So what are some of the first things that you handle? So you work with 7-figure plus business owners, right?
Yep.
They're coming to you. What are like the main things that
the most common is I've bootstrapped this myself. I'm in a ton of personal debt. I don't know where to go, right? I've got $250,000 in credit card debt with $8,500 a month payments. What do I do? Where's my next move? And so it's like looking at it at that point. Okay, what are some pieces? What's some puzzle pieces we can put into place? How can we consolidate and close out this credit card debt? How do we get
looking big picture, zooming out?
100%. How do we get your credit score up high enough so that we can apply for an SBA loan, so that we can consolidate that debt and do a little bit of expansion for you, right?
Like, a lot of it's like blocking and tackling, but when you're so like in the
When you're
weeds,
stuck.
like you can't even, like, there's like all the stress and like the hormones involved with that, and now you got like this high fatigue, and you're trying to think about these complex things.
And the fun part for me is like fun part, I guess. The fun part for me is I did it. Like, I went through it this last year, right? Like I experienced
fun part.
How am I gonna? Yeah, right. The fun part. I've experienced the same problems that they did. Is like, how am I gonna pay for my mortgage this month? I don't have the cash flow right now. Where's this coming from? How am I going to accumulate this? What am I going to do? And so I know how that pinpoint focus happens. You're like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. But there's always a solution. You just have to pull yourself away from it. And sometimes that solution is just, how do you increase your sales, right? Like, sometimes when these guys come to me,
I love that solution. Sell more. Just sell more. Like, if you can do that, you can grow a company. Like, that kind of smooths a lot of those ripples out in business. It's just selling more.
One of the best sayings in the car business is sales cures all, right?
Yes.
Moving steel and seeing gas burning
or price
tailpipes.
increases.
Yeah, or price increases. But you need both.
Because it's cash flowing through the business.
Exactly. So that's where I start a lot of times with these guys is like, okay, like, but how do we increase your sales a little bit here so we have a little bit more breathing room for you to improve on this? We gotta improve your personal credit score, but we can't apply for a loan right now because you don't have the cash flow to cover it.
Financially stressed.
Yeah.
Because you can't actually think about your business.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can.
Here's the thing about the SBA. The SBA is really easy to apply for if you have profits and good cash flow. Like, you can get access, or you have a good pro forma.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, or you have a good pro forma or like good proof of concept. You can do startup loans through the SBA as well. But like the fact of the matter is like, you still have to have proof of access to revenue in order to get the SBA. Then you need to have good credit score, personal credit score. And then the other thing that helps is having a good business credit score as well. That just gets you to another level with the SBA.
So you got to pay your bills.
A lot of people don't talk about. Yeah. So it's untangling these things that guys get really tangled into. You know, I've told a lot of them, like, if you're coming to me for a survival loan, like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. Like, this company's going out under, like, we need to look at your other broken processes before we talk about a loan. Because if I throw a loan on top of you right now, the only thing you're going to qualify for is a daily or a weekly loan, weekly payback terms, and it's going to crush you to the point that you're probably going to go bankruptcy within 6 months. So how do we fix your sales process? How do we fix your operations process? Are you charging enough to your customers?
How often do you run into that where it's someone that's done this business for a few years and maybe they're undervaluing services?
I personally think a lot of people undervalue their services more than they think they do.
How do you educate these people on figuring it out?
It's all about understanding your value proposition, because a lot of them, what they find is they're competing with these companies that just don't care, like the cheap guys, and at the end of the day, it's getting yourself out of that mindset of like, I don't want to deal with those customers that are looking for the cheapest person anyway. I want to find the customers that want it done right and know that it's going to be done right and are willing to pay for it. Like, for example, I will never myself personally pay for the cheapest anything as far as like home repairs and stuff goes, because I know I've done enough DIY stuff. I know what happens when the cheapest thing is done. And it's never done right, and you always pay double to get it fixed.
Now you got problems.
Right. But we get caught in like a price war with all these other companies because we're like, oh man, like these guys are doing it cheaper than me. I'm like, you're fighting over the wrong customers.
So how much of that is the psychology of that business owner or CEO kind of still being limited in how they think about their business?
A lot
because
of it.
They're like in that startup mode, almost like
Where
when
we
they
just
think
need
about
money.
it.
Yeah.
So you got to zoom them out.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. It's finding an ideal client it's tough. And then when you do get that ideal client, how do you mirror that client and repeat that process to be able to find more like them? And what we miss out on a lot is we get so caught up in the day-to-day stuff that we forget to ask questions to those people when we get them. So like spend some time and go back through the ones that like paid you up front full, and you're just like, oh wow, like you don't want a discount? Like that's weird. Like, all right, cool. Like I like you. Why did you do that? How come you paid me full price up front? Like what was it that I did that made you decide that you wanted to pay me this?
Customer, and what they're thinking about,
their mentality, how they think,
so that you
why
can
they did
find more like that.
Yeah. And then how do you target those people on ads and marketing? Are you working with a good marketing company that understands these things, understands attribution, isn't just selling you garbage statistics and numbers?
Let's dive into the marketing a little bit, because I love that part of it. So we've touched on sales. We can get back into that, but marketing as part of the P&L, right? Yeah. So in these companies that are growing and maybe financially strained when they're talking to you, where's the marketing as a % of revenue typically? Is it like, like they've marketed too much?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's that they've done nothing, right? Like there's a line, obviously.
You got to do something.
you know, I look at it as you either do sweat equity marketing, which is just 100% organic, where it's slow. But how do you speed this process up, right? Like I went from having 300 friends on my Facebook page to turning it into a digital creator page. And in less than a year, I have almost 5,000 followers on my page.
How did you do that?
Content, understanding what it is, again, understanding what my ideal client is, right? Like a lot of guys that I've seen that are in home services that have done this well are really active and will hire a really cheap VA. I shouldn't say really cheap VA, but a VA, right? That understands how to tag and mark them in like home groups, like these little groups and communities that you can go into, because there's people that are constantly posting stuff on Facebook groups for help and services. And it's just being personable. I post, most of my morning posts are just things that are going through my brain that morning. You know, like they're like, oh, motivation. I'm like, no, man, this is like personal motivation. Like these are things I'm hyping myself up in the mirror over, or like frustrated about in the mirror that I'm sharing. It's not necessarily motivational, but you look back and reflect and you're
do you do that with intent? Or
some days it's just like, man, this is just burning in my head. And so I just put it out on Facebook, and it's just really personal stuff. I post things about my family, and then I just post like, I follow the Alex Hormozy, and you could go back even further than like Alex Hormozy to like Gary Vee and some of these other guys of like just give free value, like to the point that it hurts almost, right? Like there's a point last year where like, I don't know why I'm giving all this information away for free. It's not bringing me anything. And then all of a sudden at some point, But
you didn't stop.
I didn't stop. And what was cool about that was that, and this is good for other owners to know too, because like give away like free tips, like do things in your community, be active, be present. That's like, is your branding on point? Like, are you branding yourself right, or are you just blending in with everybody else? And some of that is going to not get fixed until you get bigger and you can afford like a good rebrand. Not necessarily rebrand, but like just, you know, freshen up your brand. But like, are you the owner? Like, do people know what you do? Like, are you active in these communities, networking, going to businesses, talking to business owners, people?
Who you are, who your team is behind your business.
90% of business is people want to hire somebody that they know, like, and trust. And if you're not doing that from a branding standpoint as a business, you can do that for free.
Well, then you're commoditized too.
Yeah.
Like if they don't know, like, and trust you, then it's pest control near me. Who's the closest?
Who's the
like
cheapest?
They're all the same. Yeah. Who's the cheapest? And that goes right to the point that we were just talking about, where you underprice yourself.
Yeah.
Now you're charging less than the lead even costs
you
to get.
Yeah. And then to that point though, is like, okay, so you show up at the person's house, you're doing the job. Like, are you leaving their house better than how you found it? Like, what are you doing to make impressionable things on people? Like, did somebody have an issue with a car and you stayed a little bit extra longer to help them fix that? Like, maybe their battery was dead or something and you helped them jump it, right? Like things like that leave impressionable like memories on people. Because sometimes just showing up and doing the service, like that's expected. Mm-hmm. What did you do while you were there that was very unexpected that others hadn't done, that they're like, man, as soon as my neighbor next door goes, hey man, I've got all these Asian beetles on my house, I don't know what to do. You're like, yeah, Matt.
So, well, we actually talk about that, and it's part of our customer experience that we've built out is like, we call it a nicety, or that one extra. Like, what is that thing? Mm-hmm. More than just killing of the bugs and routine maintenance that we do. Like, what's that thing that the customer is going to think about more than just pest control? Because now they're going to think about Clark or Alex or whoever that might be that did that, and they're going to like have that emotional connection.
Correct.
Right. And that is really where
that's referrals come from.
That's where a lot of people think and make decisions, is right there. So as operators and practitioners, we're looking at ourselves, and I'd be interested to hear about some of the people you work with, but like they look at themselves like, I'm the best plumber. I am the bestest plumber of all time. All the other plumbers are not good compared to me. Yeah. But doesn't the customer almost expect some level of quality when they find you through whatever? Like they expect that you can do plumbing things. They have a plumbing problem.
Expect you to be good at being a plumber. So like, that's why I hired you.
So in the marketing and the conversations around that, like it can't just be that.
No. Here's a really good example. There's a plumber that I know. His name's Mitch Smedley Plumbing and Heating. His slogan is "Pet dogs fix pipes," and so they always have dog treats. Right? So, and he's down in Kansas City, and he's got a really cool deal of like, they're known as the guys that will pet your dogs, right? Like that's what they kind of are known for, their whole group. Like, so like, but on top of that, once a month, they will go around and they'll fix people's plumbing issues for free that can't afford to have the stuff done. That's what they do to be part of that community.
They actually make an impact.
Yes. So like, I think in the back of your mind, and this is really hard when you're scaling, because I get it. Like, trust me, like I just went through it for a year and I'm still in the thick of it, right? Like I'm working on hiring my first set of employees to, be able to delegate stuff out. But when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard sometimes to think about what other value can I bring to this person? Because for you at that point in time, especially if you're like in the very early stages, like I always say this, like if you haven't hit your first $1 million yet,
just go sell some more,
or even under, really, or even under like $500,000, like you're just in like, my time is everything. So how do I get to the next job? How do I get to the next job? But what I've found, and kind of as a common theme, is like the guys that have figured out how to get out of that mindset in that space hit $1 million like that.
Man, that is the real. That's what happened for me. I had to give my truck away I had to like not drive my truck. That I just put this badass new grill guard on. I had to let my brother drive that, and just because I knew that this is what the business needs. And oftentimes, like people will experience exactly what I did, where I'm in the office, something goes wrong. And my first instinct is just boom, out in the field, do it and like solve all the problems, right? Because your team is struggling. But if you do that, you bail them out, you take their learning opportunity away, and now they're limited in their growth.
Yep.
But getting out of the day-to-day, even if it's just for like a day or two, and really like having time to think, plan, strategize, have real strategies, not just a bunch of ideas, but like strategy to drive towards whatever goal you've put in place. Because goals masquerade as for sure,
they make you feel good.
I ran into my first like 2 weeks, I didn't know what the heck to do, man. I was used to going out, climbing on people's roofs and attics. Like I was anxious, feeling like I wasn't doing right by the people that were out there busting their butt on a roof when it's bat season or whatever it is. And it's when you do that, you have to be willing to engage in learning and evolving yourself as a human being.
Correct.
Changing your day to day and understanding that there's going to be nuance and evolution of that over the next however long you choose to grow your business. And
correct.
A lot of people that are young and they've done really well, they have these massive goals and ambitions, right? Well, if you're going to do that, you can't be doing what you're doing now in 2 years and 3 years. So how do people, like when they're in the thick of it and now they have this financial stress, like how are people thinking, these customers that you're working with, and what are some of the pitfalls that they kind of run into?
Well, let's kind of, I'll kind of backtrack a little bit and kind of tie this back together with the kind of the marketing question too, is you can't really pay somebody to market your company until you have a plan and a strategy in place on how you want to do it, until you understand the target market that you want to target, like until you understand how you want your company to run and function as a company. And some of that has to start thinking about, like, if I'm not here, like, what are the cultures and values that I want my employees to live by and, follow? What do I want best practices to look like? How do I want customer service to be? How do I want my customers handled? Like that's stuff that you can't do unless you give yourself time to really get out and think. And sometimes part of that is paying somebody to help you, like, think about those things. Like I say business coaches everybody says they're like a dime a dozen, but like anything else, if you find a really good business coach, you find a lot of clarity. If you find a good group of other entrepreneurs, people that are,
or something like that.
Yeah. So I've joined a couple groups now that are national. One of those is Uncaged. Another one is RBO, Real Business Owners. And the really cool part I found about these groups is that there are entrepreneurs in those groups that are at similar stages. They're ahead of you a little bit. Some of them are massively ahead of you, but they join these groups to bring value to the other people that were in there. Like there's a guy in one of our groups, his name's Jacob Stoller. He owns a bunch of health clinics, like testosterone, blood work, stuff like that. He's building a company to be exiting for billions of dollars here in the next 3 to 5 years. But he spends a lot of time coming to our group events in person to just give knowledge back to people that were in his place that he wished he would have had when he was, doing this stuff. Right. So finding groups like that are a super important piece, but also surrounding yourself with people that think like you. Because for a lot of people that don't do entrepreneurship, we just look like a bunch of crazy morons of like, why do you guys do this?
Yeah.
I see you're always running around with your head on fire. Why are you doing that? It's like, well, because I'm calm and content. I don't know. So it's a lot of that, but like you can't really start to get to that point of like unwinding your stuff until you really understand how your company works, where your sales are coming from, what your cost of goods sold are, what your plan for marketing is, what is your brand, how are you going to reach people? Because if you just pay somebody to do marketing and SEO, like how do you communicate that to them?
Yeah,
so they're just going to give you a plan and they're going to charge you an absorbent amount of money that probably isn't going to do anything for you. And then you're going to be frustrated. You just spent tens of thousands of dollars sometimes and you didn't get anything in return. Well, it's because they didn't know who to target, how to target them, and how to connect. So like that's stuff that you have to build as a business before I think you even go and find a marketing company to work with you. Right. So like I hate editing my own content. Like there's nothing worse to me than trying to sit down and edit videos. But I've realized that I've just had to do that until I get to a point in time where I'm ready to bring a marketing company on because I understand what my brand is. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to figure that out a little bit as well. Like I know who I like to work with. I know my message, but I'm still figuring out what my brand's value is, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Because I think I bring a lot more to the table than I even give myself credit for. Imposter syndrome is a big part of that. I'm just a small town guy that lives in a town of 1,400 people. What do I know? But it's getting past that. I'm just a owner of an excavation company. Like what value can I bring to my customers? A lot. Like what are some things that other excavation companies are doing that you could do better and you can build upon? How do you build a relationship with people? Like, what does that look like as a company? Right. So it's a lot of that. As a human, you hit on it earlier, we'd go through a lot of evolution as business owners. And a lot of that evolution is, killing your old self and bringing forth a new, wholer version of yourself. What does the perfect you look like and how do you continue to drive to that point? Right. Like 6 years ago, I was really overweight, out of shape, and I had a manager that told me I was fat, lazy, and unfocused, but I had a lot of talent and I was smart, and I hated him for a while for that. But it sunk in and it forced me to start doing some changing and some growth, and it led me to where I'm at now. So like understanding that sometimes you just have to bury yourself, you have to bury your old company the way you thought that your company was going to be, and you have to really kind of spend that time to flush some stuff out. I'm tired of dealing with all these cheap people. Okay. How do I get away from those? How do How do I find clients that are going to pay me what I feel I'm worth? Or what I'm actually worth?
Do something about it. If you're tired of it, then what are you going to do?
Take action. If you're tired about financials, like being stressed on financials, sell more. First and foremost, sell more. Until you get to a point where you are cash flowing strongly and you're ending each month with a minimum of $10,000 to $15,000 in your bank at the end of the month after all of your expenses are paid. Then let's talk about lending. Right?
For sure.
Like for those of you that are out there that you're ending and your bank account has hundreds of dollars in it, loans aren't going to help you. Like I hate to say it, but loans are probably actually going to be very detrimental to you. Can you articulate return of investment on a piece of equipment that you're buying? How many jobs extra do you have to get for that piece of equipment to be able to not only pay for itself, but add extra additional cash flow to your company?
Because what happens is when you're looking for lending, that community banker, whoever it is, they're going to take all the financials you put together and all the conversations they've had, and now they're got to go tell a story to the board or the decision-making process. Now they have to tell this story and communicate that this, for our bank, is a good investment because we believe so-and-so is going to pay back this at this growth rate. And that falls in line with what our bank requires. Like, it's not just that commercial banker that you're working with. He's not the guy that's making the decision, right? He's just the one that you're talking to. So understanding what happens after, organizing the finances, and maybe tackling that fear that a lot of blue collar guys might have about, hey, I'm not a financial guy, I'm not a numbers guy, I'm just this. Like, go head on into the learning of that and don't learn it from people that aren't doing it in a way that you want to be like, right? If they haven't achieved it, don't learn from those people. Surround yourself with the people that are going to elevate your level of learning. You touched on groups or communities where you're around people that are like-minded. So I've created a mastermind within the pest control space, and those people challenge me, right? Because there's so much trust that you build over time and learning about each other, spending time together, and now with that trust, it opens a door for somebody to maybe ask you some questions that they're asking to help you, right? If we're all here trying to grow and we're only looking at it in our own lens, then we kind of limit ourselves.
One of the common themes that I see with a lot of the business owners that I work with are it's very similar to what you just said. Is they get into groups. So Mitch Smedley, who I had mentioned before, he runs a mastermind called Trade Wins. And it's for home service-based businesses on how to increase their profit. And he works with some of the plumbers that are also local to him, right? Competition. But he doesn't look at it that way. He looks at it as if we all rise and we increase our values as companies, we all are going to benefit from it. Because guess what? One company can't service a 500,000 population area, right? So like small thinking makes you think of people as competitors. Bigger thinking makes you realize like, I actually need to collaborate with these guys. Because if I collaborate and I find somebody, like a really cool example of this is one of the plumbers that I work with out in California, his name's Michael Lamphere. He actually coordinates with some of the other local plumbers. They all meet up and go out to the bar and stuff after work, and they all talk and they're good friends. But they actually collaborate with each other. Like, hey man, I just got bombed with calls. I can't get to these people. What's your schedule look like? Can you hit them up?
Yeah,
like
we do.
Makes a huge difference.
We do something similar. We have a network of partners because of the services that we offer that, like, this customer is calling us and talking to us. We might not be able to serve them because they're outside of where we service, but we know people in all those areas because we want to serve that customer, because best believe we're going to be in those areas pretty soon. But like, if you just are like, nope, don't do that, or everyone's competition, like, nobody's got some secret sauce, right? Like, we're all out here hustling and grinding, and just because plumber 1 and plumber 2 are in the same market doesn't mean in order for 1 to win, 2 has to lose. Like, both 1 and 2, everyone can win, right? And like, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I would say that sometimes that lack of camaraderie is because of like jealousy in that other person's success or insecurity within that business owner. Human tendency at the end of the day is we're emotional and very irrational people.
And so what you find is that because of that, you end up having scarcity mindset, and scarcity mindset makes you a victim. And it makes you look at things and be like, he got that because of, he got money from his dad, or he got that because blah, 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 or whatever. Right. And it just makes you look at things super negatively, where part of killing yourself, your old self, and finding that anew is burying scarcity mindset. And when I did that, and this was when I got into car sales, really, when I started realizing like, man, like life is super abundant. Opportunities are everywhere. And I started putting people around me and I was listening to a guy, his name's Glenn Lundy. He has a morning show of just like positivity and like, gratitude, abundance, like helping others actually brings you to a life of abundance. Having a mind of like, I'm grateful for where I am, but I'm grateful for what I have, but I'm not content. And I know I need to learn more, knowing that you're not intelligent. I've had a chance to talk to a couple guys that are actual like billionaires, and they're like, I still don't know anything.
It's because they're learning still.
Yeah. When these guys have billions of dollars in assets that they are, and they're like, I don't know anything.
Mindset is so critical as we're going through things. Even if you as a business owner are not trying to grow your business, but you want to stay in business, look at technology in the world around us. Everything is evolving and changing. If you're not willing to learn, you're going to be that homie that's still using the flip phone in 10 years, right? Like I don't even know if they sell those anymore. So
they do. You can get them for your kids if you're going to give your kids cell phones to do the flip phone.
So really, we have to be constantly learning. And it sounds like you do that through your business as well as your podcast, and you're doing that to change these guys who are blue collar. They got something special going. They just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And at least they're seeking you out, or somebody in their area they can seek out, so that you can find a subject matter expert and learn from them, and put yourself in that space where somebody can assist you in solving a problem you have. But don't just check the box, like engage in that process, learn, so that you don't have to just come back to this person and ask the same questions over. That persistence in learning is incredibly important. What are some other things that you want to make sure people take away from this?
Yeah. For me, the biggest thing is just understanding that you have options. You always have options.
Not if you don't know what they are, though.
Correct. So it's being educated and being informed. I think first and foremost, the biggest thing I always say is just like know what to ask. Like be comfortable asking questions, right? We so often just go in anywhere, and we go for a loan, and they have this piece of paper, they slide across the paper page to us, and they're like, sign here and here. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, like, what am I signing for? How does this affect me? Where is this going to show up? If you're going to a local lender, a really good question to ask is like, is this going to show anything for me on a comparable debt? And is this going to show up on my personal credit history? Is this going to affect my DTI? Is this going to affect my utilization? Is this building me good business debt that can be used later on when I go to apply for an SBA or a commercial loan or whatever, right? Because a lot of the times these small local lenders, they have their space and they have their time, but they usually don't report really anywhere, which sometimes is good, especially when you're starting on. Like sometimes it's good that they just don't report at all to either personal or business. Like there's a niche for that, right? Like perfect. There's a time and place. But as you think about like scaling my business, part of scaling your business is like, okay, when I hit $3.5 million and I want to expand to another location, build a big commercial building, what are they going to look at? If I've just bootstrapped this and paid cash for everything up to that point, and I have no lending history whatsoever, am I going to get a loan for $2.5 million to build a new commercial building? Probably not, because you have no history, right? Like, and your personal credit alone is not going to get you a loan of that value. So like, what does my business need to look like? What do my financials need to look like? What am I building this for? And how does this all entangle and encompass like the lending that I'm going to need to get there? How do I myself learn to have a better relationship with lending instead of like, everybody's like, oh, I need to get a loan. It's like, well, yeah, because you keep trying to get loans to survive, and those suck.
What's the purpose of the money?
Correct.
What are you going to use
lending
it for?
leverage is a whole different feel for business owners. Like when you get to that point and you're just using lending as a lever to scale, and you find out that you can use other people's money and it's not connected to your personal assets whatsoever. It's
a beautiful thing.
That's a wonderful place to be.
It's a beautiful thing.
And you're not going to get off of personal guarantees on everything, but learning how to get access to money that at least doesn't show up on your personal credit, right? So like stuff that shows up on business reports is very, very difficult for people to read and track, right? So even if you're personally guaranteeing something, but it doesn't show up on any of the personal credit bureaus and shows up on business bureaus, if something does go wrong, it's very, very difficult for people to track it, which means that you are much less likely to get any kind of like legal suit that's going to go further than your corporate veil, right? The problem with personal bureaus is it's really easy to track that stuff. So like when lawsuits happen and lawyers use those personal guarantees as an in, that's where you see like companies like just completely crumble in a day, right? Because, I had an umbrella policy. Doesn't matter. A good lawyer is going to get through that and go after all of your stuff. They're motivated by money, but they're lazy. Most of them, right? Like, so it's like building it with intent. Lending should be built like anything else in your business and thought about like anything else in your business. It should be built with a plan around it and intent. Because if you start with a good foundation right out of the gates and you set yourself up well, how does my company look? Like, what does my business address look like? All of you guys out there running around with like Paul Childers, financials at gmail.com, stop it. Pay the $12 a month for an actual domain. Get a professional address. Get a one-page website for $400. You can afford it. It's going to make you look good. How do your social media pages look? Because guess what? Underwriters will track that stuff. They'll look at it. Are you posting a bunch of garbage and like negativity? Are you trolling everybody? Like that matters. Business, like banks want to know the type of person you are and how involved you are in your community. So if you have a good brand and you're really involved, like the lenders, especially if you're doing local stuff, like they're going to want to work with you more because they're like, that's a guy I can get behind. If you're known as like the town drunk and like the giant moron of your town, you've been cheating on, like you're the guy that goes around and like cheats on everybody's wives while they're at work, whatever, right? Like don't be that guy because it's going to make it really hard for you to get anywhere. So like, just be a good person. That's not really that hard to do.
It's not, but like, and have a plan. Here having this conversation.
So be a good person, have a plan for lending like you do anything else, right? I mean, if you don't have a plan in place and you're doing reactive lending, it's always going to be a bad experience. If you understand that lending takes time and it takes a plan and it takes understanding your financials and it takes having good sales and it takes kind of a combination of everything, you're going to have a lot better time when you need a loan than always needing a loan to survive. And that's really when businesses when you get to that point, scaling comes so much easier.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Paul. I got one more question for you, and then we'll have to wrap up here. I think we're a little over time. So the word hustle in terms of business, what's that mean to you?
I think, you see hustle a lot in the cult. Like it's subculture of like blue collar is like hustle and grind. If you ain't working 15 hours a week, what are you doing? Like if my hands aren't bleeding, I'm not working hard enough. Like to me, that's garbage, right? Like hustling, to kind of quote Andy Frisella here, is using your time effectively to achieve the goals that you are out and active to chase, right? Like if your goal is more freedom, then why the heck are you working 15 hours a week and breaking your bones in your back?
Doesn't make any sense.
If you're truly hustling, you would be hustling with the purpose of, I understand that right now I've got a 3-month stretch where I just got to put my head down and I just got to push through this because I know after that 3 months, I'm going to hit this point in my business. And when I hit this point in my business, that means that I'm going to get a little bit more freedom. So it's like knowing when to do it, how to do it, having clear goals in mind, hustling with a purpose, and understanding that like we're still human. It's okay to have a day where like yesterday, like I felt off when I woke up. After I ate lunch, I unplugged and I watched a movie. I didn't feel bad about it
sometimes,
right? Like it is what it is. Like even really high performing people give themselves grace and give themselves time to just be like, man, screw today. Today sucks. I'm going to go play video games.
Man. Life's too short. Like there's not a lot of good that comes from it.
But yeah, hustling is just having a purpose and hustling for that purpose and understanding when you need to put the extra work in and when it's okay to just step back and enjoy what you built.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. Paul Childers, Roll Up and Roll Out podcast, Blue Sky Biz Solutions. What's the best way to get in contact with you, Paul?
Yeah, best way is through Facebook. I mean, follow me on Facebook, honestly. Yeah, it's just Paul Childers on Facebook. I'm really easy to find. Even on LinkedIn, it's just Paul Childers. Common theme. Instagram is PA Childers. But that's honestly, I'm most active on Facebook. Otherwise, I've got my website, blueskybizsolutions.com, which is undergoing some rechanges right now. But best place, is Facebook. That's where I post almost everything. I'm on there daily, and I put a ton of content on Facebook and Instagram. So
that's awesome. I'm going to check it out. Roll Up and Roll Out podcast. That's on Spotify.
Spotify and Apple. Yep.
Awesome. I'm going to check that out for sure. Thank you so much, Paul. Really appreciate you coming on the Homegrown Hustle today.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate being in.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us on Homegrown Hustle. Our local business community thrives because of the brilliant leaders right here in our backyard. And it's been an absolute privilege to provide them with a platform to share their invaluable expertise. Stay tuned for more insight, wisdom, and inspiration from our local business champions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Together, we'll continue to nurture and expand our homegrown success stories. Matt Eickman signing off until our next insightful episode.